I'm Shannon.
And I'm Mark.
And this is Dirt Sailor, the podcast. Happy Throat Punch Thursday.
Well, happy Throat Punch Thursday.
How are you doing on this fine day?
Well, I suck, by the way.
Why do you suck this time?
As opposed to the last 200 times.
Ha 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 ha.
I set everything up and can't even remember my own glasses because I can't see anything without them.
A seeing eye dad?
Well, I can see without them. It's just that I can't read without them.
Me either. I must have gotten that from you and my mother. So thank you very much.
No, you definitely got it from your mother because she's been wearing glasses since about the age of 10. I just got it from getting old.
Ah, that old age gets you every time.
It does.
Aging gets you. Old age is a relative discussion point.
Well, they say that getting old is not for beep.
I thought it was the young at heart. You never get old.
You never get old. I'm never going to get old.
Never give up. Never surrender.
I'm never going to give up my position in this global world either. I'm going to stay true to myself, and I'm going to make sure that while we podcast for the next 20 years, everybody knows a little bit about everything.
I think that that's a good goal. It's my goal too. I would like to make sure that people know what's going on. If they want to deep dive into something, hey, let's do it. Just don't be afraid to look into something. You hear something that kind of piques your interest and you think, man, that doesn't really sound right. And that doesn't sound like how things should be. Let's see how we arrived at being that way. Look into it. I encourage all of our listeners to do that.
Absolutely. And I try to look into all of our leadership, past, present, and potentially future. And it boggles my mind watching the Washington news and Washington establishment protect what I think are potential criminals.
Why do they protect certain people over others, even when two people appear to be nearly identical, seemingly do the same wrong, and yet one of them is protected while the other one is fed to the wolves? Why is that?
Well, I think it's apparent to me that the deep state, whatever the deep state is, continues to pick winners and losers. The deep state is in the CIA, they're in the FBI, and they're entrenched in life-term congressional and senatorial bidding. They're there forever. We have a handful of them that have been there probably since birth. And
they were set up to go that way?
By that, I mean, yes, they were set up to go that direction. They have family members that were doing it, and they just progress and move them on until it's their turn to take over. And why I'm thinking about this, it brings me to the Bidens. I still do not understand how a man that was just this is a funny one, average Joe, can rise to the power that he has amassed.
Risen to, yes.
Risen to the power that he has amassed. We know not we, but the powers that are close to him know for a fact that he's corrupt, and him and his entire family have been taking money from other entities for years, yet we're unwilling to prosecute or even dive into it. Why would that be?
Why is he such a protected person?
Yes.
Where did this Biden person come from that he is so protected? He wasn't very good in school. Hey, congratulations. He graduated from law school. That is more than other people can lay claim to. He graduated law school at the bottom. That wasn't a sufficient enough win for him. He has to repeatedly lie about his educational history, his class status, and then later on when he gets caught, oh my bad, sorry, but then he just goes right back to the same lies that he made before. We see that his brother rides his coattails, or takes on his name, doesn't even ride his coattails per se, and gets all of these deals that should never happen because the brother has no history in these things, and it seems the brother teaches the nephew how to do it. There is nothing in Hunter Biden's history that says he should help a fuel oil company a gas company, insert any other company here, you can become an artist and be really good at what you do, but has no history in art. And when every door seems to slam in his face for making deals, all of a sudden he's an artist. And that's a great way to launder money. And I've heard this not just in his art, but in the art field in general. Overpaying for art is a great way to launder money. So who is Joe Biden, this average Joe of average standards, to rise to the level of the presidency?
Correct. And like I always tell you and other family members and friends, that I am just a simple guy. I have a simple mindset, and I'm like the tortoise that has to walk through life, and I have to look at things, sometimes multiple times, to analyze it. And I think I've come up with the Biden Achilles heel, which started out as a good Biden, which would be Hunter. Hunter was able to use his dad's name, manipulate, and get all these millions coming in. I do not believe that dad nor uncle expected him to get addicted to drugs, alcohol, and turn out the way he has. So they had a perfectly oiled machine running, and then a hiccup with fame, lots of money, and drugs. And it has upended these folks, because if the State Department, scratch that, if the Justice Department were to actually pursue the evidence that is in front of them, they would be prosecuting probably 4 of the 9 Bidens and impeaching our president. They'd have to impeach him. They couldn't charge him right away, because you can't charge a sitting president. You can only impeach with high crimes and misdemeanors. Once he's out of office and been impeached, then you could prosecute if you chose to. But to me, that's my analysis of kind of watching this thing the last few months unfold. Is today the light went on, and I'm thinking they're beside themselves that Hunter is the man he's turned out to be, and it's going to unfold the entire operation, and hopefully some of them will be punished. And it'll be put in the history books that we had one of the most corrupt presidents ever in history. And his last name was Biden, first name Joe.
Yeah, it's interesting looking into the things Hunter Biden did that has come to light, and then brought, as you said, brought everybody else's well-oiled operation, well-oiled machine to light. And some of it includes setting up these business bank accounts overseas so he can launder the money through the bank accounts. We wouldn't have some of the details that we have if it wasn't for the Hunter Biden laptop scandal, which is that he went to get his laptop fixed and then refused to pay and pick it up, or else this guy, the laptop business owner, wouldn't have likely published all of this information, because he didn't put it out there until such a time that Hunter refused to pick it up, refused to take ownership, and then the ownership reverted to the repairman. But something that has come out is Burisma asking Hunter Biden for his passport, utility, and other details in order to set up a bank account in Malta. And that bank account was later closed following a financial crimes probe into the bank. And other individuals were investigated because of their shady dealings. We wouldn't know that he had this bank account publicly as a society, but for the fact that emails were on his laptop. So we wouldn't know about this wrongdoing. And here we are, we could suspect and we could think, and people in the inner circles could talk about it. But now we have some physical, it's really digital, but physical evidence supporting what people have claimed for quite some time. And you have Hunter Biden's also being looked into for his art dealings, because he's getting he's requested a reduction in child support, and the mother of his child is saying he should still have to pay because he has many wealthy opportunities. And so now he had to sit for questioning because he's claiming not to have money, but then they talk about how he's selling his artwork for tens of thousands of dollars, but he can't afford to support a child. He can't afford any FaceTime with his child, as far as we know.
Nor can they put a Christmas stocking up at the White House.
And even acknowledge this child who DNA evidence has supported is his daughter, is his child. But we get to know these things because he had a child and then refuses, or doesn't want to refuse, but has requested that his child support be reduced. So again, there are ways that we wouldn't necessarily know that this was going on until a laptop comes around, a court case comes around, public records are being disclosed.
And the federal forms that have been turned into the FBI for years about his dad and getting $5 million each.
Yeah, so apparently there is a request from the House Republicans for Joe Biden to be more transparent regarding his personal tax returns because an investigation has found that one of his corporate entities reported nearly $10 million in revenue without detailing the sources of said revenue. It is claimed that Celtic Capri Corp, an S Corp for Joe Biden, was not listed on his personal tax return or campaign website, which raises questions as to how transparent he is being about all of his income sources. And this is a large income source, $10 million to your business. No idea where it's come from. Right now, a claim is that business housed the $5 million for Joe and the $5 million for Hunter.
Ooh, that totals $10 million.
And that is right now the claim that $10 million is payments to each of them. Although there was the Federalist Society, they took issue with a 2020 article by USA Today, which attempted to hold that the money earned for Joe Biden was from speaking fees and book deals. And that was between 2017 and 2019. And that more than $10 million in total income was profits from the memoir Promise Me, Dad. And $3 million was profits from Jill Biden's book. And then following these citations, USA Today article led readers to no details on the S Corp. And then so the Federalist Society is saying that was a smokescreen.
So I should have better notes prepared on the federal form that all this info's on from the oligarchs that was turned over to the FBI. Form 1023, 1523, whatever the form number is. Apparently now there's multiples of those. There's not just one form. They've been around for 5 to 7 years. So then obviously people within the FBI know that the man is potentially corrupt. And there's always leakers. So there has to be a bunch of senators and congressmen from the other party that know all this has taken place. And why wasn't it brought out years ago?
Each time that he's run for presidency, why isn't it trotted out like, hey, this guy can't be trusted. There's 10,000 forms on him or anything. So it just doesn't make sense. And I understand that a person may set up different entities so they can have their money separated by a business versus a truly personal or a nonprofit, because he also runs a nonprofit in the name of his son, Beau Biden. He does a nonprofit in his son's honor. And that's actually where he donates. If you look on his personal tax return for Jill and Joe Biden, they donate to Beau Biden's foundation.
Yes, and here's the key thing for me. I want everybody in America to be wealthy and live a great life. However, when you do it at the expense of others and you cut corners, you cheat, you manipulate, and you use your name to pad your coffers, and then you tax the bejesus out of everybody else because you happen to be a person of power, I'm not good with that.
I agree. And so this is one area that I take interest in. I am not saying that somebody should ever be allowed to do it. And I'm not saying that we should look the other way when it's the right person or the wrong person. I know that there are many people out there say, oh, but he's the great unifier or whatever they want to claim. And so we should look the other way when his son does the wrong thing. We should look the other way when his brother does the wrong thing. I, as a government employee formerly with a clearance, could have lost my clearance if a relative too close to me was seen as a possible in to wrongdoing and manipulation. So that same rule should apply for him. But I look at what they're doing right now to Trump, and they are going after him in every avenue and fashion possible. Oh, you had classified documents? We're going to go after you to the point of indictment. Hillary Clinton has classified. Oh, well, she didn't mean it, and it was an accident, and she didn't really know, but it was a mistake. Joe Biden has documents found all over the country, but he's such a good guy, and he would never do anything wrong with him. It must have really been an accident. We're not going to indict him. And then we have Vice President Pence. Same thing. He's got classified documents. Clearly, they all do it. Hillary Clinton, Pence, Biden, Trump. I bet you Obama has some waiting to go into his presidential library that is breaking ground in Chicago. If they all do it and there's precedent for these high makas to take, high clearance level documents out, why are we going after one?
Well, that's kind of a loaded question because you know why. There was a congressman today on the news that talked about the act that controls these classified documents and presidents, when they leave office, having the ability to load all these boxes up, take them home, or take them to a place of their choosing. They have 5 years, according to this act, to separate their personal documents from classified and or other documents.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is Trump still has 2 more years. Well, 3, because he didn't actually get out until 2021, January.
Correct.
So he would have 2.5 more years to finish looking at the documents. Pence would have 2.5 more years as a VP, assuming the same rules applied. If the rule doesn't apply to a VP, then he should be gone after. If it doesn't apply to a Secretary of State, she should be gone after, or should have been gone after. I'm sure the statute of limitations is up. And Biden, if a VP does not qualify, automatically he should have been gone after. But if a VP did qualify by 2022, because he was out in 17, so 2022, that's when he should have given it all up.
Correct. The issue with Hillary wasn't that she had classified documents. It is the fact that she destroyed evidence that was subpoenaed by a federal agency.
Right. She destroyed the evidence that would have otherwise pointed to her guilt. And who is allowed to, I guess they say that we send stuff to our personal emails all the time as government officials, whether it's classified or not. So she shouldn't be in the wrong for doing that. She just should have turned it over. So why at the point that we know that it was destroyed is she not gone after, instead of being careless or whatever word they decided to describe her as?
Well, that was the former FBI director and an attorney that reclassified a letter as to what she had done wrong. Here's the thing, though. If they're classified, they're classified. If they're top secret, they're top secret. You and I talked about this a few podcasts back, that we overclassify stuff. There's hundreds of thousands, if not millions of documents every year that get classified. We don't have enough people. They don't have the right software to mark this stuff and then mark it unclassified and redact and do all that. Well, they should simply start from square one again, like you and I talked about. They need to change the rules on how we manage classified documents when a president, vice president, secretary of state, or the local janitor, however they leave office. They needed to bring her in, bring in Pence, bring in Biden to a skiff of our choice, bring all these documents in that they had, go over them, and say now, here in the future, we're going to do X. You're going to be punished for this, even if it's just a fine, but we have to show the American people that the scales of justice are equal. We have to. Because if you have, and I'll use that young kid again, that young man that was on that submarine, if you're willing to throw a petty officer, third class, an E4, in prison for 3 years because he took some pictures of the galley and his workstation, nothing that he felt was classified, just to show family members,
this is where I work.
This is where I work. Then the scales of justice are not equal.
Very true. Speaking of the military, so the United States military has been running a covert operation to monitor criticism of its top brass with surveillance efforts, and they go so far as to pinpoint the exact coordinates of Americans who expressed dissent on social media. So there is actually a U.S. Army Protective Services Battalion, and they have been tasked with safeguarding top generals from assassination, kidnapping, injury, or embarrassment, which is definitely something when you have top generals, you want to make sure that they are safeguarded. I do get that, but apparently they recently expanded the definition under, I'm guessing, embarrassment to include applying it to criticism online, which opened up the Army's resources to trying to see and find anyone who may have expressed a negative sentiment of leadership.
So anyone that's currently on active duty or reserve or anyone?
U.S. citizens and otherwise, anyone.
Well, you can follow me, U.S. Army, U.S. Navy, U.S. Marines, U.S. Coast Guard, NSA.
Don't forget the Space Force.
Yeah, and the Space Force, because I will criticize you if I feel it's warranted. If you are doing something that's contrary to you raising your right hand and swearing an oath to the Constitution of the United States and we the people, you're going to hear it from me.
And so I personally thought this was interesting. It was the first time that I had heard they were sleuthing and trying to find people who were speaking ill, and it could cause embarrassment of a top level general.
Well, they're following in line with YouTube and Twitter not so much now that Elon owns them, but other social media organizations.
Yes, and there was a recent article that I read through where one of the ways the U.S. government, is getting around their surveilling issues of U.S. citizens. So lawfully, or in order to be lawful, our government agencies are not supposed to, it is illegal to, not supposed to surveil U.S. citizens. Now, we had the Snowdens and others come out and say, hey, guess what? The NSA is surveilling U.S. citizens. Hey, the government is using warrantless searches of U.S. citizens. And it would get trotted out, and then as they went after Snowden or anyone else who has released information to show that the U.S. government has actually been investigating and surveilling U.S. citizens. A new way that they are working to get around that is they are buying information from these private companies that run data sets and basically surveil internet traffic across the United States. Now, normally when these companies gather the millions of data points across the U.S., they will make them anonymous, so they won't attach it to an IP address or a name if they know it. They will make it anonymous and then sell that data. So you might know a general area is more interested in, say, Tesla cars in another area, so you know that you might want to put your ads over there, whatever the case may be. Well, the government has been buying this anonymous data, but then they've been able to use data points that they've gathered or otherwise purchased and basically take the anonymity away. And so they're not surveilling U.S. citizens, but they're taking data that they can restore from private
Well,
companies.
these guys know how to backdoor and do stuff. It's just like when you and I talk about, like, say, California giving you a $500 check because your fuel is currently too high. And people are just all giddy across the state until the end of the year when you realize you're going to pay taxes on it. They will find a means and a direction and way to surveil you legally or partially legally and tax you and spend and take.
And now, even now, we have former President Barack Obama is pushing to basically attach digital fingerprints to everybody. And this is how he says we can fight misinformation. So that would be a new way that we could surveil people too, if everybody's required to have a digital fingerprint.
See, it depends on a definition of misinformation and surveil. As you know, we have another Democrat trying to run for president against Joe Biden.
RFK Jr.?
Yes. And he was just removed from an interview with Jordan Peterson, or let me back up. YouTube has removed a Jordan Peterson interview of RFK Jr. for violating vaccine policy.
Their vaccine policy is whatever the government says you're required to inject in your body, and whatever they say is truth is the only truth that anyone is ever allowed to say. That's YouTube's policy.
Well, isn't it interesting that my big thing is we got to wait for the empirical data. We have to wait for all the injuries to come out. We have to wait for all these studies. Well, I wasn't going to dive into COVID tonight, but a nice little study came out this week from South Korea. They have looked at 44,276,704 individuals.
Oh, 44 million?
Yes.
Over 44 million individuals.
Yes.
Okay, so South Korea, over 44 million individuals.
And they were looking at heart failure and cardiomyopathies or myocarditis. They tried to separate them out from COVID-caused myocarditis or vaccine-caused myocarditis.
Which I think is very relevant.
Yes, and
very important.
They had found out that of the cases that were happening, 19.4% of them were very serious, and they were from the vaccine. More from the mRNA vaccine than the others. So here's another case where we were told, take the shot, shut your mouth. We know what we're talking about. Well, it's going to be proven again that the vaccine or vaccines were not as advertised.
Well, when they first came out, how many times did you hear from the talking heads on CNN, MSNBC, all of those, I think even Fox News, take the shot. That way we can stop this pandemic. You take the shot, you cannot get COVID and you cannot spread it.
Correct. And the interesting thing is that our organization that controls the U.S., the CDC, is still recommending that you get vaccinated. All ages, 6 months and up. During the South Korean study, they discovered that males aged 12 to 17 had the most severe cases. So do you think maybe it's time for our CDC to wake up and stop it?
And let's just say that there are, after 17, the risk posed is minimal to none. Okay, so why not say if you're a male between the ages of 12 and 17, not recommended. The risk is too high. Once you reach the age of majority, 18, we have shown very limited side effects. You would have a much better opportunity of not having the side effects if you wait until 18 or 19 or 20 or whatever the general cutoff is. Why are we saying that no matter what, take this? If the risks are higher for 12 to 17, why are you saying children should be put at risk?
Correct. So Denmark did a similar study almost in parallel with South Korea's study, and they found the exact same results, that it was not good for their population under the age of 40.
Okay, so why would you keep telling people, in their particular case, Denmark, under the age of 40, no dice, no bueno, don't do it. Over 40, super helpful. Get it. If that's what the study found, that you're better off at 40 getting the shot, and before the age of 40, don't even consider it because it's unhealthy for you. When you tell me that no matter what the risk is, put your child at risk. Put yourself at risk. There's opportunity not to put yourself at risk if you wait a couple years, but we don't think you're worth it.
Correct. And it's interesting that this YouTube video was pulled for vaccine violation. I think that the super intellectual bots that work for YouTube should start looking at all this empirical data and all this information that's starting to come out, because here is the main COVID lockdown casualties. Do you know who it is?
I'm going to say it's not, we didn't kill Grandma and Grandpa?
No, it's the children. As political leaders obsessed over protecting children from a virus that presented little risk to the young, they ignored far bigger dangers, which were young adult people hit a 20-year high in suicides and homicides, and they just looked the other way and demanded that people continue to get the shot, continue to stay locked down, continue to stay masked up. Nothing to see here. COVID did not originate from a lab in Wuhan. It originated from a wet market. Well, do you know who one of the award-winning news guys is that just discovered that this is not true? Mr. Matt Taibbi?
Yes.
That 3 scientists were originally infected at the Wuhan lab.
I think it was in October or November.
They are dead. We spent...
Of 2019, by the way. So they're dead. They are dead?
They are dead and gone.
Is that because of getting infected, or is that because China stopped them from speaking?
I wasn't there, so I can't answer that. Well, here's the kicker to all of that is they developed it in the Wuhan lab. We paid for it.
Oh, absolutely. And Fauci is the number one spender of the money, along with, I can't remember the other head of the secondary government agency, but the two of them spent millions upon millions upon millions of research dollars a year. They were in charge of doling it out. You had to be on their good side. And they funded gain of function research. I don't care how many times you listen to Fauci. He is a liar. And he changes his tune to try to make himself sound like less of a liar. And what kind of person who is a scientist who does research, I understand you can be an expert, but tells people to quit questioning him because he is the science. Narcissist.
Narcissist, potential, the other term. Very bad guy.
Absolutely. And there was a study that came out. I was looking for it, but I can't find it offhand. And I want to say it was in 2018, pre-pandemic times. And I might have even read it while I was reading a book on Waco. Like, how did people get involved in the cult life and what happened? But isolation, especially in the younger ages, but in general, isolation will mentally change you forever for the worse. And we are seeing that now. How many people still talk about having PTSD from the lockdowns? When we need human touch and human talk, we need that face-to-face, even if it's just at the grocery store, at, the tack and feed store. That was taken from us.
Yeah, it's interesting that it's all their terms. It's all their science that they come up with over the years. And then at the first chance they get, they throw all that out the window and tell you to just do what I say, not what I do. Because as they were telling us to do this, they were going to dinner at the French Laundry.
And the leader in the UK was having parties at 10 Downing Street. multiple parties, so many people, and they were under threat of, if you drive too far outside of your household mileage location, you could get arrested and ticketed. And they were crossing counties, hosting parties. You had people here, as you just noted, at the French Laundry, having a party of such a large size that any of us could have been in big trouble for doing that. They shut down restaurants. They shut down locations. In Los Angeles, there was a restaurant who did a social isolation table setup, so that way they didn't have too many people in a group too close together. They were shut down by the county, Los Angeles County, but movie production agencies were allowed to have the exact same setup to feed their production staff, identical, and they were not shut down. It was not about the science. It was not about truth. It was about control. Because how many times do you hear, especially from the left, I know when I studied criminal justice, all the way up to the PhD level, you do not put people in solitary confinement for years and not expect that to break them mentally. It has such a profoundly negative impact on the human psyche that it should not be done.
Correct. And when you don't let people get out, especially young youth and older people, get out and exercise and move around and go see other people and do things. What's that saying? Atrophy?
Yes.
Yes, atrophy sets in and you turn into a bowl of jello. So, like you and I have talked multiple times, they should have looked at it from the beginning and then realized we're going way overboard here and ratcheted things back and started changing models. A couple countries overseas did that and it worked out for them for the better. But I would be here to tell you, not being a scientist, which means I'm a simple guy and I can read and I can understand things and process them in a different way. They coded that thing to take out certain individuals. And I don't mean conspiracies as far as let's take out, a senator or a congressman. It knew how to attack certain DNA strands and chains. That's why they've talked about the DNA library we have and Indian people and people of certain descent that have been around, their bloodline's been around for thousands of years, and how it actually was a detriment to them and not a help. And I'm not the brainiac that came up with that. That's all the science you can look up for yourself, and it's factual information.
Well, let's keep talking about the science. Joe Rogan has challenged the #1 vaccine champion, recognized by, I believe it's the American Medical Association, to debate Robert Kennedy Jr. He has offered to do so with a $100,000 donation to a charity of his choosing. And this is Dr. Peter Hotez. He is a dean at the National School of Tropical Medicine at Baylor College of Medicine in Houston, Texas. He has lashed out in response. And I do get, just because you say, why don't you debate him? You're supposed to be the best. Why don't you debate him? You can be an incredibly intelligent person and know the most about a topic, but it doesn't mean that you're good at debating.
Correct.
So that might not be the avenue or venue. But a lot of people are getting behind it because he started to target articles if Joe Rogan or Robert Kennedy Jr. are on it to say that they're promoting trash. Well, if you're promoting trash, then why don't you come and back up your position? I also understand why they would say that.
Right, and they can change the format of the debate and just put 2 easy chairs out and just have them sit there in a comfortable environment and just have a discussion. And the discussion then turns into pros and cons in a debate. Because I would be very good at that format, and I would be okay on a stage debating, but I would be much better sitting down having a conversation with somebody. And let me back up, it's the Neanderthal gene, by chance, I believe, that is an issue for people, and there's a lot of folks, I think it's 0.01 or 0.1 of the population has the Neanderthal gene, but that equates to hundreds of thousands of people.
Well, in the case of this doctor, he said that there were 200,000 unvaccinated Americans that needlessly perished during our awful Delta/BA1 COVID waves, including 40,000 in the state of Texas, because he's from Texas, because they fell victim to vaccine disinformation. And so he's claiming that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is a lead purveyor in mis and disinformation. So I would be most interested if he would go on and have an open-ended discussion, open forum discussion, and then Robert F. Kennedy can say his piece, and then this doctor could take it down because he would, in his position, arguably know and understand how one can make that argument and then say, yes, I've heard this question from my students before. However, XYZ is the truth, and this is why.
Okay, so what about the hundreds of thousands worldwide that did take vaccinations because they thought it was the right thing to do, and they perished from COVID? Because the numbers are both ways. There's people that died with COVID having the vaccine, and there's others that had comorbidities that did not vaccinate that died.
Well, and they admitted at the CDC that they were including if somebody got into a car wreck and died in the car wreck and they tested them for COVID post-death, they were still counted as a COVID vaccine death or a COVID death.
It's because they didn't know what they didn't know. And let me throw a little caveat out there from a discussion just a little bit ago. One of the major funders of gain-of-function research is who? Do you know who?
Fauci?
No.
Oh, who?
It is the former CEO, or if he's still the CEO, of Microsoft.
Bill Gates?
Yes, his organization has given millions, although maybe thinking that it's the right thing to do, he's very misguided. It's very, very dangerous.
Well, he's a 100% supporter of GMO. He wants meatless meat. Augmented vegetables.
Right. Well, if he wants meatless meat, then he should eat meatless meat.
Why do you got to make something? Here's my thing on that. Why do you have to make something out of something, but call it the other thing?
Right. Just call it
vegetable burger.
Soybeans.
Soy burger, vegetable, because it doesn't sell as much. I got to make you think that what you're looking at is meat. No, don't eat meat. If your position is no meat, don't try to make a meat substitute because you're still pushing for meat, whether or not you know it.
Right. You want to be a real, see if I can say this word without botching it, philanthropist. I always botch that word. If you want to be a real one, let's save all these kids that are being undereducated across America. Show us what you have. Put your real foot forward and take all the hundreds of millions of dollars that you're wasting and give school grants on a mega scale. You're obviously not, because we have failing districts across America. Or maybe that's just not your cup of tea. Maybe telling people what to eat, telling them what to grow.
As long as he can do whatever he wants, but because he told other people to do it the different way, it's cool. Just like with his flying, he can fly in nice private jets because he tells other people not to do it.
Right, and that's why I think they're misguided and they're frauds with their carbon credits and all that sort of thing.
Just don't do it.
Just don't do it. I'm going to do it. You don't do it.
Do you think that most people, we're going to segue into a different topic if that's okay with you. Do you think that most people understand the fare rules when they buy a mainline flight?
Maybe 10% of the flying public.
So you have the big airlines, you have American Airlines, United, Delta, among others. You have Southwest, you have the low-cost carriers, Frontier, and what's the other one? Allegiant. JetBlue is kind of in a different space. But you have all of these companies, and they all have little bit different ways that they run their airlines. But generally, when one of the big ones starts to change the rules, the others look into doing it. And so American Airlines is now eliminating complimentary checked baggage for international basic economy tickets. So this is starting June 6th. All tickets, regardless of fare class, were previously entitled to one checked bag on flights to and from Asia, Middle East, Europe, Oceania. However, starting June 7th, there is now going to be a charge if you have a basic economy ticket. This is something that I struggle with because on international flights, you do expect your baggage allowance to be a little bit bigger. At least I do. And so I knew people who would fly from the smaller airport to the bigger airport. So going, say, from Fresno to Los Angeles or Fresno to San Francisco, and their baggage allowance would be different. It would be 50 pounds and 2 bags at the time that I knew it, but 50 pounds and 2 bags on the smaller airplane. And then once you got to your international flight, it would be 70 pounds. And so we'd have people show up at the airport that only had the 50-pound allotment for their first leg. They would have 70 pounds in luggage. And I understand. You think, oh, I've gotten an international ticket. I should be able to take 70 pounds. So it would be a huge headache for them. I know people don't understand it. And I respect that they don't. And now we're going to make it even harder where you're going to have one kind of economy ticket and another kind of economy ticket. And they're not going to realize until they get to the airport, it's $100. It's $75. Oh, you want that next bag? Price goes up. Oh, you want a third bag? Even higher.
And if you want to eat on the flight, it's going to cost you even more.
Yes. And so I know a lot of these low-cost air carriers have made the news lately, especially in the United States market, because Allegiant and Frontier, they will check to see if your luggage is too big for their size if you have a carry-on. And if it is, they charge you extra money for having an oversized personal item. And there were cases where people are videoing their bag fitting into the appropriate carrier, and then the airline employee says, nope, you got to pay for it anyway, because it turns out they got a percentage of the money that they would make from all of those excess bag charges. They incentivized it.
Bonus time.
I know that's not happening with American. And I talk to people all the time about buying a ticket, and they might be traveling with their child, and they'll say, oh, I'll just get a basic economy ticket. And I'll pay for one bag when I get to the airport. No big deal. Like, do you want to sit next to your kid? Because your basic economy ticket is going to get you 2 different middle seats, possibly not even anywhere near each other. Are you prepared to fly without your child next to you? Do you think that they are aware enough to put the mask on their face if they need oxygen, or to, speak up for their own space? Hey, someone's trying to take over my seat, or put their bag at my feet, or whatever the case may be. Are you good with them sitting by themselves? I've heard people say, oh, well, I'll just ask somebody to switch me seats. Okay, but I paid more for my ticket. You might not realize this. Even if I paid regular economy, main cabin economy, I paid more for my ticket, so I didn't get a random middle seat. Why should I give up my window or aisle for you who wanted to pay less, even if you're a parent, for you who wanted to pay less?
Correct. No, no, and no. I'm responsible for my child, so I will sit next to my child and help them in the event of emergency. Interesting thing is, though, I just heard a comedian say last night that mask is actually not to provide you oxygen. It's to keep the screams to a minimum as you're on your way down.
I'm going to have to agree with that, because when they're like, although the bag may not inflate, oxygen is still flowing. No. Did you put your seatbelt on right? Are you sure? Did you take it off? Did you reach a nice little bump where you hit your head? Are you passed out now?
Yeah, yes. And as it relates to bags, I generally only fly with the clothes I have on. And then when I get to my destination, I buy new clothes. I wear them while I'm on vacation, and I donate them to the homeless. And then I fly back home in the same suit I was wearing. Just kidding.
What's funny is my daughters have asked to do that. Can we just hop into a plane and then buy clothes and stuff when we get there?
It's my grandbaby, smart girls.
But I have flown Right now, I think I'm up to at least 130 flights that I can actually put pen to paper and remember. I can't remember all of the flights I have ever taken. My daughters have taken 28 and 34 flights themselves, and I consider us a decently seasoned family of travelers. And I look into a lot of this as far as the baggage allowances and international. Once you go international, that really starts to bother me because that's when you are generally taking a little more with you. You're not going for a quick trip somewhere where you can take a roll aboard and forget the rest of your stuff, or especially if you're going to see family that you haven't seen in a number of years, you are trying to get a cheaper ticket and then you're trying to fill up your bag so you can give presents to the family that you haven't seen in many years. And this is just another barrier, another cost.
Yes, and rules and regulations change based on who's in office at the time and what kind of pressure they get from the flying public. So just like hamburger prices, nothing stays the same. A ticket that's $100 today in 6 months from now may be $350. And a lot of that has to do with the cost of doing business, the cost of wages, the cost of fuel. Everything goes up, it goes down, just like flying. You go up, you go down.
Yeah, I have found if you book a ticket on Allegiant and when I tried to look and see if this would work out financially in my benefit, once I said that I was going to book a ticket, that I had a piece of luggage. If you have a carry-on, that's another charge because they charge you for your luggage that goes under the plane. They charge you for your luggage that goes in with you. If you want to pick a seat, they have charges for everything with that airline. Once you start to add all of those together, your ticket is going to generally be more expensive than if you had gone with a mainline.
Right. I look at all that stuff occasionally, not as often as you because I don't fly as much as you do anymore. But generally what I look at is the technicians or the aircraft mechanics and the avionics technicians to see what the history is of that particular airline to make sure that myself and my family are 100% safe on the flight. I know there is no 100% certainty when your feet leave the ground. Anything can happen. But if you have a bunch of NTSB reportables of stupid stuff that this airline has been doing and not doing proper maintenance, and they're having ramp issues and runway incursions and things like that, I don't care what the bag costs are. Even if they're all free, I'm not flying on them.
It's funny that you bring that up. I was looking into just random different flights because I got a Facebook advertisement. I'm like, oh, what would it be to go to this particular location? It was a far off destination, so it was going to take many hours on a plane to get there, foreign country. One of the possible flight routes included Sri Lankan airline. I'm like, oh, never flown them. It's their main airline of Sri Lanka. I'll look into it. Don't do it. No offense. I hope Sri Lanka gets better and their airline gets better at what they're doing. But everything was how late your flight's going to be, all of the mechanical issues your flight's going to have, the inside product deteriorating, the outside product deteriorating. Nothing but really, really bad stories, especially when it came to maintenance.
Absolutely.
So no.
I was just going to say it's their best maintenance practices. And I watch a lot of videos like and I watch people that travel around the world on sailboats and power boats. And then when they get to a destination, they can't take their boat to another little island, so they want to fly. And then I watch them, how excited they are to hop in that little airplane and go island hopping with it. And I'm thinking you really need to look up the history of these airlines before you're willing to just jump into that airplane and go flying. Because it's not like a car, as you know, that you can just pull over and fix it. That's why I know that the hangar that I work at and all the guys that I work around and I see, they're very professional, and I feel completely comfortable and safe on our airline because it is a very dependable piece of iron.
I will say of all of the regional flights I have ever taken, I've had the best experiences on your airline. And that is not fluff, I would tell you, or I would not even bring it up if I didn't. But I would say that I definitely prefer it over others that I've ended up on. Even going to and from our local hub here, other companies that have taken over time and taken the flights because they They all do bidding, and certain flights get farmed out to different people. And better experience have been had on that airline.
Absolutely. And that's why I'll look at route structures out of our local airline, and like going to, we'll just pick Las Vegas for one. We used to fly to Vegas. Our code sharing partners didn't want us to any longer. So we picked up different routes, and there's other airlines that go to Vegas, and there's only one out of the two that I have 100% trust in, or at least 95% trust.
Yeah, I would say I've only flown one out of those two airlines to Las Vegas, or through Las Vegas in some cases. And while I appreciate the mechanics of one of that airline that I have flown, we have had some onboard issues and tardiness issues with said airline, but their people are generally good, and their maintenance issues have not been so significant to cause me worry to want to not take that airline. Do you remember the Arizona Democrat state lawmaker that we talked about that was hiding Bibles in the common area of the space for lawmakers?
Yes.
So she has been censured after she was caught on camera hiding those Bibles. And what's weird is she's an ordained minister.
That means nothing, because I know a couple of ordained ministers that I've worked with in the past. And one was a very honest and true to light person, and the other one not so much.
Yeah, I guess she was found to have violated the House rules on engaging in disorderly and disrespectful conduct.
So she was found to not be the sharpest tool in the shed.
Yeah, she said she did it as a prank.
What say you?
It would be a funny prank if there was a story behind it. Like maybe someone said every time they go to look for a Bible, they find it at a weird place around their house. And then she knew that that person was going to be in the lounge during that time. Okay, funny prank because there's a story behind it, or there's a running gag or a running joke. This just seemed to be nothing of the sort. So what's the prank?
She was just trying to cover her tracks. She made a mistake. She knows it. So let's do a little quick talk about scuba diving and being in submersibles and that sort of thing underwater.
Okay, let's do it.
I only say this because I just recently bought a couple of pieces of equipment, and somebody was asking me about scuba diving and how cool is it, and is it hard to do? Is it safe? And I was telling a young lad who was 13 years old that as long as you follow the rules, you buy the best equipment that you or your family can afford, you make sure you have it serviced on a regular basis, it's a very safe sport. As a matter of fact, if you look at the stats, generally, just like other things with older people, when there's issues, it's generally with older people that don't keep themselves physically fit. They get into a stressor, a stressful situation, and they have some type of potential stroke or heart attack, or something goes wrong.
Okay, yes.
So we were talking in the same general area about submarines and submersibles and that sort of thing.
Okay.
And he asked me if they were safe. And I said, generally they are, because the technology is very good. However, when people go underwater and they submerge themselves that deep, there's always a potential for something to happen. So if something does ever happen now or in the future, just be aware that everyone that's in that submersible knew the risk, and they also know the reward. The reward's very high, and the risk is very high as well. So just as long as they keep that thought in their mind, everything will be good.
So we've previously touched on Marine veteran Daniel Penny. He has been indicted in New York for the subway chokehold death of Jordan Neely.
And what that means is don't try to defend yourself or others in New York.
Not at all. And in New York, you do have the duty to retreat, but as we noted, it was on an active subway. Where are you going to retreat to?
Correct, and where there's been hundreds of incidents over the last couple of years, and there's been a lot of deaths as well.
And this individual he was definitely suffering from mental health issues, definitely needed more help than he was getting, or more help than he may have wanted in some cases. But he had a long history of attacking other subway riders to the point of having to get treated at the hospital. And I can't agree with New York on this one. I understand that this man died, and I bet you this Marine vet never wanted that to happen.
No.
He's not just celebrating, yay, I killed someone. But it was brought up that the claim is he was in a chokehold. Some of the video that I saw was he was put into a recovery position. So it appears that the chokehold stopped at some point. But when you're being attacked and getting attacked by someone, at what point do you release them? For me, if I were strong enough to put somebody into a chokehold and keep them at bay for a period of time, it would be when help arrived. Because I know that if I let this person go and they continue their attack, I might not get a second chance at stopping them from said attack if I got my first chance at stopping them.
Yes. And he was a professional Marine, so he knew at what point when the body goes limp, how to put them in the recovery position. And 9 times out of 10, they recover because those were basically, it's a Brazilian jiu-jitsu move or chokehold. So he knew what he was doing. It's just unfortunate that the guy died. But let's do a quick risk-benefit analysis. Is the person that he put the chokehold on and unfortunately passed away in a better situation now than he was prior to boarding that train and losing his life?
I don't know that I would say that he's in a better position now. I mean, you'd hope that he's in heaven, so you can say arguably we hope that he's in a better position now. However, not treating someone's mental health issues and then society is responsible to be put continually at risk, and your membership in society means that you're required to just take a beating whenever we don't treat somebody's mental health issues.
Right. No, the reason I said it in that form was I was just thinking about doctor-assisted suicides and that sort of thing. These doctors feel that they're putting people in a better situation by medicating and letting them slip into a coma and then death. And this guy, in my humble opinion, may have had such a tormented life. He may have been so emotionally wrapped or done that this may have actually been a godsend to him. And I'm not condoning chokeholding somebody and them dying. Don't get me wrong. It's just you got to look at all avenues of this to say, okay, the guy had been arrested 40-some or 140-some times. He's threatened people. He's beat them up. He spent time in prison. So what's the cost benefit or the risk benefit? The guy, was he going to go down the right path? Had he caught his breath and survived? Or was he going to be a repeat offender 3 months from now? You just don't know. It's an unknown, but some people look at that as it's one of 100 million. He's, lucky or fortunate that they tried the recovery position. They could have just let him go without it because he was alive and he was breathing and making movement when they put him in the recovery position. So maybe he was on drugs. Who knows? We don't know.
Yeah, I'm not sure if they've released a toxicology report in that particular instance or in every instance of somebody acting out and a person in society responding to the way that they're being targeted or treated. And there was another incident on another train that is bringing up self-defense in the New York justice system because a 20-year-old Queens man, Jordan Williams, has now been charged with manslaughter following a fatal stabbing on a Brooklyn subway. Williams claims he acted in self-defense after an altercation with a violent ex-convict. And this individual is a 36-year-old man who has been reportedly hassling passengers, including Williams and his girlfriend. The situation escalated when this individual punched Williams's girlfriend in the face. And then Williams and this man got into a physical struggle, which culminated in Williams stabbing the man twice in the chest. This ex-convict had previously served time for attempted robbery in Queens, stumbled onto the platform after this altercation. He was rushed to the Brooklyn Methodist Hospital and was pronounced dead. This is Williams's first encounter with the law. He has no history of encounters with the law, and he insists through his attorney that he was protecting his girlfriend who was just assaulted, punched in the face by this aggressive man. When are you allowed to defend yourself? And New York is saying, oh, you're allowed to run away. Okay, I'm on a train. What do I do? Can't run away. Okay, you can defend yourself, but you can't stop the person from assaulting you.
Right. And some senators of power have bodyguards. So what do you think would happen on one of those subway trains if a senator was accosted? The person would be stopped immediately. Now, I listened to one of the national news outlets that has a big office in New York, and all the news people there have talked about them riding the subways and seeing this sort of thing on a regular basis, on a weekly basis. So if the New York police department and justice system can't get their criminals under control, the populace should be within their full right to defend themselves and defend others, even if it takes somebody's life.
And obviously there's a similarity in this particular case that just noticed a person with a lengthy criminal history harassing, assaulting passengers. But the so far start of the arrests and indictments have been different. Mr. Penny received release. He was released, had a voluntary surrender, and the claim is low bail. This individual, Mr. Williams, similarly aged, 20, no criminal history, has been charged, and they're saying charged without a thorough investigation, and he's also being held.
They're keeping him at Rikers?
And he is African American compared to Mr. Penny, who is white. Wow. That's part of the claim as the differences. Why is it that there's similarities in their cases, but they're being treated differently? Well, one is out of Manhattan, the other one's out of Brooklyn, so you have different
jurisdictions are treating things differently. And it's unfortunate, and this all goes back to what you and I talk about quite often, which is George Soros funded DAs not prosecuting and holding criminals accountable.
So if you wanted to immigrate to the United States unlawfully, where do you think you would turn to get yourself into the U.S.? Like, where would you look for your smuggler? Would you look in the classified section to say...
Craigslist.
Well, apparently, modern times call for modern measures. And smugglers are advertising on TikTok and YouTube.
It's kind of what I figured. It was going to be a social media outlet.
And they're the purveyors of stopping misinformation, but human smuggling, totally cool.
Told you, these bots need to be educated.
Child trafficking, also cool, because we've seen in the past, even Twitter, pre-Elon Musk, they couldn't stop child abuse problems on Twitter, on these social media platforms. Oh, but you speak out in a way that the government doesn't like, they can stop you so quick. But migrant smugglers have been advertising influencer style on TikTok and YouTube. And whether you need human smugglers, drug cartels, what do you need? What do you want across the border? Who do you want transported? How do you want to get them there? So the videos show coyotes taking migrants across rivers, and the migrants are smiling in the stash houses on how they get there. Smugglers charge $10,000 per person. And find your smuggler on TikTok.
It's interesting. And I was just looking at migrants the other day, and somebody popped up with exactly what I was thinking on the news. Is you see all these people coming up from further south in Mexico in really nice clothes, really nice shoes. They have cell phones. They don't look, I think they're supposed to be destitute. They're being beat up by their own governments. I think that the way they look is a little bit different than what they're portraying themselves as.
Because our government is touting this, we must save these individuals who are just here to seek asylum. And the truth is the vast majority of them are not true asylum seekers. And I've said it before, economic migrants, no judgment on that, everybody wants a better life, is not a claim to asylum.
Well, let's say that they can't vote, pass a law, they can't vote for 20 years. Let's see how quick everything stops and turns around. Because that's what they're doing, is they're building a voting base, a voting block.
So in the past, we've talked about January 6th. We talked about Gretchen Whitmer and the scandal with the FBI, being that there were more FBI informants and undercovers working on the scheme to kidnap Gretchen Whitmer, and the person who started the whole scheme was FBI. The FBI basically made the scheme to kidnap Gretchen Whitmer and then tried to ensnare people along the way. Two of the individuals were found not guilty at court, or at least they were acquitted. Two others was a mistrial, and then they retried them and they were found guilty. Now the FBI is being accused of grooming a disabled teenager into becoming a terrorist. So the Department of Justice announced the arrest of Mateo Ventura, who is 18 years old and from Massachusetts. He's being charged with providing financial support to the Islamic State terrorist organization. And apparently, for this case, the only terrorist is Ventura, and he's accused of being in contact with an undercover FBI agent who reached out to him when he was 16 years old. So Ventura was arrested for knowingly concealing the source of material support or resources that he intended to go to a foreign terrorist organization, and in this case was ISIS. It turns out that an undercover FBI agent befriended the teen online and then solicited small donations in the form of gift cards. The agent instructed the teen not to make anyone else aware of their relationship. So Ventura's family has denied the allegations against their son and have accused the FBI of manipulating him because they claim the teen suffers from developmental issues and was forced to leave his school due to bullying from other students. So then he was targeted by an FBI agent when he was a minor, and then solicited, got him to give gift cards, and it was only, I say only, any material support obviously is bad, $705 total.
He's a rich kid. Wow.
Through solicitation.
Didn't they used to call that entrapment?
I would think so.
And doesn't the 50 or 100,000 FBI agents have better things to do?
Then trick a disabled teenager into materially funding. And it's not like he said, yeah, I'm going to do it, let me send it myself. He sent it to an FBI agent, and I get it. There's cases where a person thinks they're soliciting a murder for hire, and they're really working with an FBI agent or informant, but they are the one that solicited, not the other way around.
Yeah, it's different when somebody starts looking on Facebook or YouTube or Marketplace or OfferUp for a hitman than it is to have the hitman call you and say, hey, you know what I can do for you? You know, if they would have focused this much energy on the Clintons and the Bidens and others, we wouldn't still be talking about this, which is good for us, though, because that's what we do is talk, for the last 5 to 7 years. And the Clintons, the last 25 years, because their chicanery goes all the way back to when he was governor of Arkansas and she was a lawyer. in Arkansas.
So jumping back into that, what people have been known for and how long they've been known for it, the Clintons have been known, as you said, way back when, governor and lawyer. Let's take it back. There have been people hiding their truth for a long time. And you have people who have helped Biden, even when little snippets of truth come out, they help it to be turned around or buried again, not to be brought up, at least for a few decades in his case. But we see video evidence of these different things out there, and we're still told not to believe our own eyeballs or our ears. So during a press conference in November of 2022, Joe Biden made comments or remarks about Donald Trump potentially coming back and returning to power if he were to, well, he is running for the presidency, but become president. So after a little bit of information or back and forth on it, Biden was asked to address the international concerns about Trump's possible return to the political scene. So his response was, they are using the legitimate efforts of our Constitution to ensure Trump doesn't become president again if he decides to run. So that was before he had thrown his name back out there. Oh, we're using the Constitution to make sure that he can't run again. We are going to make sure that we do everything we can.
So they're going to cheat.
It's the Constitution that's stopping him. It would be the Constitution that's stopping him if they weren't charging him with crimes that, if a crime, everybody else did it too. So why aren't you charged, Biden? Why aren't you charged, Pence? Why isn't Hillary charged? Why isn't, I mean, as you noted earlier, Hillary was under an order to give over evidence when she destroyed evidence.
See, there should be parallel prosecutions. If Biden really had classified documents and top secret documents in secret at his homes, then he needs to be prosecuted as well. I know you can't prosecute a sitting president. You have to impeach them and on and on and on. But it's irrelevant because we only have the House and not the Senate. So if they were to impeach and push it over to the House for trial, they would not impeach him.
They would not be able to. So you know all of our fact checkers who come out and they say, oh, it's not true that Biden had documents, or he really, really didn't mean it, or the documents were truly secured. Whatever we can do to sway how the misinformation is read. Did you know that a review of fact checkers, of all the ones that they could find that made political donations, almost 100% of those political donations go to Democrats?
I've never understood that. That makes no sense to me unless they feel they're afforded protections that they cannot get from the other side. Because if you align what they say they want to do versus what they really do, they're diametrically opposed. They do not make sense. Every time I see Bill Gates' picture on social media, I want to...
Do you throw up a little?
I want to upchuck a little. Well, just because you can look and see that it's a man that was able to ride off of someone else's coattails, because I don't think he invented squat either. It was somebody else within his organization that did the inventing. And he was a salesman, and he was able to buy his way up to the top. And now he's trying to put his thumb, per se, on everybody's head or neck and try to dictate to us how we should live. And it's just wrong.
It absolutely is. Another topic that we've brought up on this podcast has to do with the hard-fought rights for women and how much it took for us to get to a level of equality, whether it be Title IX in women's sports. I've mentioned before how Fresno State even got put on notice because they had 3 more men's sports than they had women's sports that they were actively funding. And there are times where you have to put different groups on notice. Hey, you are treating women to a detriment, and you can't do that. It's against the law. But then all of a sudden, we started seeing men overtake women's sports by calling themselves women, and we are just supposed to sit back and let it happen. And one of the places that we're seeing it, we saw it in Connecticut, we saw it on the East Coast, but we're also seeing it in California. And we are as has been said, dismantling women's hard-won rights in the name of progressivism. So are there still women in California? Are we allowed to exist? Because it seems like a lot of the state's laws are geared towards allowing men to take over women's spaces. We're required to give up our bathrooms. We're required to give up our shower rooms. We're required to give up our female-only spaces. We're required to give up our sports spaces in the name of equality and progressivism. Now the best women are men. So we're seeing it in California, and you can get into a lot of trouble now if you don't affirm your child wanting to have different pronouns. They're actually looking into removing children from parents if the parents use the wrong pronoun. It's gotten to such a degree. So Johns Hopkins, I'm going to segue a little bit. Johns Hopkins University released some of their updated definitions. So this is also their progressivism. And they updated the definition of the word lesbian. See, back in my day, a lesbian was a woman who wanted to be with other women, generally speaking. But in the glossary of terms for Johns Hopkins University, they said a lesbian is a non-man attracted to a non-man. We can't even say women anymore. We're now non-men.
Boy, we have a bunch of knuckleheads in control. That's funny, though, because I used to talk about definition of terms all the time in word salads. And I would look at a word and I would ask somebody, well, who invented this word? What does it really mean? And the person would give me their answer and I'd say, it's just words. They're subject to change at any time. And that was like 35 years ago. And man, I should have been a prophet. I should have bet on this. I'd be a wealthy man. Well, what is gender equity?
I don't know if I can give a definition because that mark seems to change. So what in your current viewpoint is gender equity?
Well, let me tell you what the WEF says. According to the World Economic Forum, it will take just over 135 years to reach global gender parity. A few years ago, it was about 100 years, but the COVID-19 pandemic added over 3 decades. There are a few reasons for this, including the fact that women make up the majority of the industries most affected by COVID, like the hospitality and retail industries. Women also took on more responsibilities at home, such as caring for children or other family members. Many had to leave the workforce. Women's rights clearly have a long way to go, but as we've seen from history, progress is possible. And it's kind of is oxymoron the right term when they're talking about transgenderism and wokeism and pronouns, that this is kind of not how they're trying to portray and push women?
It's almost a competing set of priorities or a competing set of ideas. We have that competing set of ideas. We have the idea that the government is our only savior as well. That if we just give up enough money through tax dollars, that all of the world's problems can be solved. And we're also going to do that by giving to these entities. The United States forks over all the money, all of their money, so that way we can make a world impact.
And I was thinking about that this weekend as well. Homelessness.
Fresno just got millions of dollars, I think $17 million. Just one little piece of the pie just recently. It's not their whole get, but from the state is doling out more money to solve our homeless crisis.
Right. And like I was telling you, I work at a very snail's pace. So have we been able to fix starvation and homelessness in Ethiopia and other places in Africa and other countries?
You mean where it's cheaper to do it, so our dollar should actually go further?
Yes.
No.
So what would lead us to believe that through the hundreds of billions of dollars we're spending here, we can fix homeless in our own country?
We can't solve our own issues. So how mine is in the reverse. So how are we going to solve the world's issues, which is exactly what you're pointing to? We're not doing it in either location. We're not doing it overseas, and we're not doing it here. But look at who's getting the money. Look at all the NGOs that are getting wealthy. Look at where the money is actually going. And we talked about this last year, I want to say it was, where you were diving into some of the breakdowns of these businesses, nonprofits that start up, and only the person at the top is making six figures and more. And then everybody else, they want to be a volunteer, and maybe they might get progress on a person or two, but there's really no accountability. And so it's all of these people with all of this money going to people who aren't homeless, and their job is to make a six-figure salary from homelessness.
Yes, and I would bank on the fact, that there's a lot of LLCs that are attached to these nonprofits and to these people that are, quote, helping the homeless. Because I've been in this home here now for I think 13 or 14 years, and I go around the corner to go to work by a local fast food place, and I see the exact same homeless people there every day. And the sheriff's department or highway patrol or the police department come and hush them away, rush them away, and within a day or so, they're right back. And you look at them, if you look them straight in the eyes, you can see right through the back of their head and into their soul, just like the gentleman in New York that died. These folks are lost, and if we don't get them the proper help, this is going to be what we say all the time, which is a wash, rinse, and
repeat.
Yes.
Because look at all the taxpayer dollar wasted in that cycle too. Every time the police come, instead of responding to another call, they're responding to this person. Then they're using the gas to go over there, put them in the back of the vehicle, spending everybody's time, rolling their prints, giving them food depending on how long they're there for, getting them in front of a judge, doing no money bail, or chances are it's no money bail because most of these individuals do not have bail money. Doing no money bail, and so depending on how long it takes for them to then get released and come back, they're going to go right back, and the process starts again. So all of that money is wasted because we never helped them, but we spent money never helping them.
It's a feel-good, touchy-feely thing. As long as we think that we're doing good or doing right, it's okay in people's minds.
It feels good. Doesn't feel good to me. It feels like a waste of money, and we never help people. I would personally like to help people.
Well, it feels like fraud to me. Just like we haven't talked about one of my favorite vacation spots in the world is the islands of Hawaii.
Hawaii.
And how they have indigenous people, I guess would be the...
Not if you look at the past rulings, even of our Supreme Court, they are not considered to be indigenous.
Okay, you're right, because of the...
But they are specifically looked at as Native Hawaiians or Hawaiians, not put in... They typically hook them into the same category as indigenous, but because they come from so many different islands and then converge into the Hawaiian Islands, are not actually considered...
right.
The same
of a
way.
certain percentage of blood.
It's a weird thing.
Yes, it is a different thing, but you have the same type of thing there. You have an organization that has hundreds of millions of dollars.
Are you talking about like the Hawaiian Money Fund?
Yes.
Billions.
Yes, billions that are supposed to help Hawaiians get into homes because it's so darn expensive to live there, because the Haole, the Chinese, the Japanese, and I guess they're considered Hales as well, they've all moved there. They've all built superstructures and such, and so they've made it unaffordable for locals.
Yes, so the Hawaiian Homes Commission Act of 1920, which was enacted by U.S. Congress to protect and improve the lives of Native Hawaiians, and then the act created the Hawaiian Homes Commissions to administer certain public lands, again called Hawaiian homelands. So there's a name for everything, the Homestead Act, but the Department of Hawaiian Homelands is governed by that original act that I said, and yet all of the money is misspent, and it takes people 50 years up to retirement, up to death, before they would even get the opportunity at a new home that they're going to have to start making money payments on.
Yes, and that's where I was going to go, is a couple of my coworkers are from the islands who have family members that have been on that wait list for 40 years, now have the opportunity to buy and get into one of the homes, but they're too old. They're retired and they don't have the money to make the strokes, which I imagine are not that cheap.
They're inexpensive compared to a regular person going and buying land at
Well,
regular
wait a
rates.
minute.
But as far as the Hawaiian land,
Right.
it's still very expensive, especially considering how expensive the island is in general.
They're regular people though, right?
They are regular people and they would have the opportunity to buy any house they wanted to, but that's going to be at an increased rate that everybody else has to pay. And this was supposed to be a way to keep some of the island local.
So then the Hawaiian Homestead Act is not doing a big majority of the islanders any justice.
No, it is not. And then also, because you have to have at least 50% Hawaiian blood, and many native Hawaiians have started marrying other Pacific Islanders, they've gone below the 50%. And even with the Kamehameha schools, which also had the 50% Hawaiian blood requirement, they started looking at reducing that because there aren't enough whole natives to keep the schools going. And so if that's happening, that means you should have enough land and money to give to the 50% and above.
So then the answer is just hold on to the money and don't give any of it to them?
That seems to be their answer.
Well, how about we do this? Is one thing that was okay for California. I'm not in agreement with federalism or federal entities and state entities telling businesses how to spend their money and how to run things. But maybe a little rent control law over there, maybe a mortgage control. They need to look at what the root causes of the rising prices, which they already know. That's a rhetorical thing. And they need to adjust accordingly, take a lot of the land, start building homes, and start handing them out.
So part of the claims, by the way, under why some of the land hasn't turned into housing for natives is because the land that was sectioned out to give back and keep native was not buildable. So they didn't set aside buildable land for these houses.
Well, you'd think they would do that before they let a Chinese, Japanese, or even Trump's corporation build skyscrapers there in the middle of downtown. Or if they build one, they just said, okay, Mr. Trump, you're building Trump Tower on this street corner. Right across the street from it, you're going to build another skyscraper that's going to help bring 500 locals into home ownership.
Right. And as of 2020, they had built just 3,300 residential lots statewide. That's all of the islands. That's not just Oahu, although Oahu has some of the biggest need because it's the most populated. But 3,300 residential lots since 1995. Their wait list is over 23,000 people. However, 23,000 people to me doesn't seem like a terribly large wait list when you consider that over 1 million people live on the islands. And they already live there. They just need the housing. So stop approving housing tracts for the regular everyday builder. That's just, stop approving them.
It means
just
a lot
stop.
of the local councils and the governors and them are in it for the money.
And who's on the local councils? Not all of them are native, but some of them are.
Yes.
And they're still doing the bad things. They're still approving the things that shouldn't be approved.
Because money breeds corruption, right?
Yes, and that's why you ended up in a big thing. While I was there, I was seeing some of the tail end of it, but the Kealoas, so you had the head prosecutor and the police chief who were doing bad things, framing a relative, taking from their own relatives. There was a lot going on with that. It ended up going federal because there were so many statewide who were helping them to hide their bad dealings, including other police officers.
I always knew Hawaii 5-0 was real and all the people did really have burner phones. I knew it.
But the reality is they could fix this problem. It is fixable.
Why fix a problem when you can keep yourself employed by always having a problem? If they fix the problem, then they won't have jobs.
That's true.
Just like the homeless situation here in California and across the country. If you don't fix it, you'll always have a career. The criminal element must be the Yakuza.
The Yakuza. Okay, last thing I'm going to bring up off of some of our government officials and studies. Something we've talked about a lot is studies and empirical evidence and where's the data? Show me the data. If I am wrong, show me the data that I am wrong, that there is empirical evidence that does exist. Hey, Shannon, you're wrong, and this is how.
And we accept it.
So Representative Dan Crenshaw was asking a Democrat witness to answer what studies she had to support the benefits of surgeries for trans kids. So he just said, hey, this is the Yale School of Medicine assistant professor, McNamara. Name the study. Name a study. Show me a study that it has been done, it has been proven, and this is the way to go. Surgeries, especially when they're under the age of 18, has supported that they have a better outcome into adulthood. So you got to start young. Show me the studies. And so when he asked to cite a medical study that shows these benefits, the professor could not cite one study. She accused him
Knew it.
Of saying that they cherry-picked data. So he said, okay, I cherry-picked data, or we cherry-picked data. What's the study that shows that I cherry-picked it, or that your way is, in fact, the best scientific supported by evidence? She just said, so it's very unscientific and flawed to pick a single study or a single statistic and discuss it in isolation. Medical experts are able to talk about all of the evidence as a whole. His response, totally agree. What's the studies? So he cited studies to say for him it was more than cherry-picked as he was being accused of. The British Journal of Medicine looked at 61 systematic reviews with the conclusion that there is great uncertainty about the effects of puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, and surgery in young people. And so what say you? And she could not pick one study. She just started trying to attack the quality of the study that he was citing. Okay, well, what about you? Please tell me. No, could not bring up anything. All the proof went poof.
That was a good one. All the proof went poof. That's because that's how they work. When they don't have a leg to stand on, they like to start throwing epithets out there and try to turn you into a bad, misinformed person. What's that remind you of? Oh, COVID studies, the shot, isolation, masking, all the above.
Right. He repeatedly asked to, which journal says something different? We should debate that. Tell me the journal that has done these reviews.
Yes. Shouldn't you go in there armed with the information in the studies? That's her fault for not coming in prepared.
So all she would say is the standards of care were developed and then, based off of extensive blah, 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 blah. Okay, that's not a study. You're saying the standards of care. What's the study? The standards of care. Okay, that's not a journal. That's not a study. That's not an organization. That's not an institution. And as you said earlier on this podcast, you're just saying words.
Yeah, she just went in with a basic set of talking points, and she was not going to deviate from the plan because they don't have a real study. When they do, like you said, we'll look at all the studies, multiples, peer-reviewed. That's what all these experts have been talking about for 3.5 years now, that we have to have the scientific evidence and the proof. Well, the proof's in the pudding. Here it is. If you don't have a peer-reviewed, multiple scientists studying it, then there's nothing there. Just like this South Korean study, just backing up a little bit to the shot and the myocarditis side effects, there was 7 heart doctors amongst all the others that are from many different locations that had all the right answers. So it was a great peer-reviewed study, but then automatically people started trying to tear it down.
This has been a podcast produced and edited by the Dirt Sailor Duo. Mark and Shannon are a father-daughter team who both served in the United States Navy. This production is protected by copyright laws. Until next time, anchors away.